Hello and welcome to Homicide Hobbies. I'm Andy,
And I'm Claire.
and we're here to talk about some of the disturbing things that go on in the world, past and present. We feel like not knowing doesn't mean the crazy doesn't exist.
So we're going to scar you with the knowing.
Enjoy. What do you got for me today, Claire?
Today, we're going to the second driest state in the U.S. Also, a state that has more plastic surgeons per capita than any other city in the U.S. And it's also the only state to have a cooking pot in the state symbol. Any guesses? No point, you won't get it anyway. We're going to Utah, particularly Salt Lake City in the 80s.
All right. Do I need a pen and paper?
Not gonna lie, I don't really remember this one.
So it's entertaining.
Take it as what you will. We're going to find out together. And we're going to start off in 1963 when an undernourished 2-year-old is discovered in the street in just a diaper.
Oh.
Neighbors are going to call the police, and naturally, child welfare workers would be called out because it's not usual for a 2-year-old to take a walkabout with just a diaper. Even if he had other things, I feel like.
Yeah.
Anywho, a failure to care petition was made against the little boy's mother, but this little boy, Ronnie Lee Gardner, would be placed back in his mother's care, regardless of the fact that the welfare worker found the home environment distressing.
What's distressing mean?
Do you want the definition of the word? I don't know. I wasn't there, but the welfare worker didn't find it to be a thriving place for a child, but this child still went back to the mother.
Well, I wasn't sure if you were saying like it was just filthy, if it was like,
Probably all the things. Ronnie's mother was Ruth Gardner Lucas, and Ronnie was the youngest of 7 children.
Ah, that's why it's distressing.
She didn't even notice when one wandered out. Now, when Ronnie was born, she would ask hospital staff to sterilize her because she couldn't handle any more children. And I believe her. She couldn't handle number 7. Now, before Ronnie is 18 months, his parents would divorce and his father would already be restarting his family with another lady.
He didn't have enough kids?
Now, mind you, it's the 60s, so you know how they would hit the reset button and ditch that first family altogether, which wouldn't really matter anyway because his dad, Dan, would claim that Ronnie wasn't his anyway.
Why do they do that? Don't do that.
Because mentally, they can do the whole, it's not my kid, so then I can not have any fucks to care about that one because it's not mine.
Sick.
Anyway, so Ronnie's mom would get remarried to a man named Billy Lucas, who would end up locked up in Wyoming for burglary in 1968. Now, Billy would use the boys as lookouts during his burglaries, so I feel like him being locked up was probably a good thing for everybody. Because Billy was only too proud to give Ronnie and the other children pointers on how to commit robbery and setting up a burglary. It was pretty much disgusting.
Wow.
Now, Ronnie's mom, I guess she was so distressed.
She was happy that they were doing something and out of the house. She didn't care what they were doing.
No, she was so, I think, mentally fatigued with that many children that Ronnie's mom would walk around the house wearing the children's stepfather's belt around her neck as a visual warning for their compliance.
Holy shit.
Because she would swat the shit out of them with it if they got out of line, which part of me laughed at, but then I feel like she's just like one of those hostile cats that walks around flicking their tails. That's what I imagine the belt as. But Ronnie would be punished often with physical violence, but would eventually stop crying when he was beaten and just kind of zone out altogether.
Poor baby.
Now, even though authorities were aware of the neglect and abuse in the household, they would still return Ronnie back to the same environment just as a mere note taken and nothing to fix the situation. Now, some of the excuse by his parents was that Ronnie was hard to handle, and that's why whenever he would be found out and about and they'd bring him back, that was just he was the young out of control one.
But he was 2.
Well, this goes on for his childhood.
Oh.
And not just a wild out of control 2-year-old.
I mean, I feel like all right.
Now, Ronnie had a half-sister who was just 6 months younger than he was. Her name was Bonnie. And an older brother named Randy. Now, by the time Ronnie is 5, he would be sexually abused by his older sister and her teenage friend.
Um,
I know. It's real sad for Ronnie. Now, by the time he's 6, he'd be introduced to huffing or glue sniffing. And then
sorry.
by the time he's 10, he begins using regular drugs. And to make it worse, his parents would let him not only continue his glue sniffery and drug use, but they would also introduce him to alcohol. Now, mind you, he's 10. So to say that this youngin lacked structure, discipline, and a positive role model is really putting it lightly.
Yeah, it's like the understatement of the year here.
And so it shouldn't catch you by surprise for me to tell you that this little boy would turn into a nasty, unruly, defiant child. Now, when Ronnie is 10, his brother Randy would steal some cowboy boots and get caught and arrested. They would be taken to juvie, where their dad, Dan, would be called. Now, when Dan got there, he would talk to officials and tell them to leave Ronnie locked up and he'd take Randy home.
What?
Naturally, Ronnie would be super upset at being left, even if his dad and his relationship was one rattled with neglect and physical violence. It still was, he took his brother, his pal, and he was left in juvie.
Is it because he was the ringleader?
Well, he's the young boy.
Yeah, but it doesn't mean that he can't be the ringleader on the naughtiness.
Now, again, all the while, Ronnie's parents will be like, Ronnie was always a hellion and hard to handle, so that's their excuse all the time when something with Ronnie is the thing. Now, with his home life making him a nasty little boy, his parents would decide by the time he turns 11, he had already been in and out of juvenile detention 12 times.
Oh, shit.
And lived in a series of institutions. His parents would decide that he needed to be committed to the Utah State Hospital under the excuse of him being out of control and they need help. Naturally, the doctors see the undersized boy and think it would be better for him to live in a mental hospital, even if he didn't have a mental illness. Mind you, there are children in there that are psychotic and have unusual behaviors. Now, one doctor would say that at 11, Ronnie had the bone structure of a 5-year-old and was way undersized and scrawny for his age.
Was he being malnourished?
Yes, so it was like he was also the young one, and there was all sorts of neglect in that house. So,
well, I kind of actually, I take back my questioning of that, because if you look at my kids, my boys were all small till they hit their teen years. Like they're underweight, they're scrawny, they eat like food's going out of style, but
you don't have an 11-year-old that's the size of a 5-year-old.
No, but I had a 15-year-old that was the size of a 9-year-old.
This isn't about you. But naturally, though, when you put kids together that are the same age group and you got one that's real teeny tiny, the older boys or the bigger boys would immediately pick on the little one, teaching Ronnie he had to fight in order to earn respect.
Poor baby.
So this little boy would fight. He would fight respect for himself and to keep the bullies and threats away. Now, eventually, he's going to be released back to his mother, and almost instantly, he's back in trouble with his criminal behavior and his drug addiction worsening. He would be tossed into a state industrial school on and off for several years, which is basically a juvenile detention / rehabilitation school. Now, while he's there, he would meet a feller that was friends with his older brother Randy, and that feller's name was Jack. He would start visiting him regularly. Now, mind you, he's still a kid. Now, Randy was pretty much living with Jack at this point. When Ronnie would break out of the rehab school or just disappear and be on the run, Jack would let Ronnie crash at his place. Now, eventually, Ronnie is released at 14 years old from that school. Jack was allowed to be his foster parent regardless of the report by a social worker of men being dressed as women during a home visit.
What?
And I'm just going to say, what the fuck is the point of a social worker in Utah if they can say, like, there's neglect and shit going on in this house and a kid's still placed in there? Or, yeah, you're fine to be his foster parent even though there's weird shit going on. Not to say a man dressed as a woman can't take better care than his ma, and I guess maybe that's the scenario that this was placed.
Yeah.
But I'm just gonna tell you, up till this point, I thought it was fucking weird for a grown ass adult to be hanging out with tweens.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a red flag. And it's an even bigger red flag that the social worker is like, this seems sketchy to me, but whatever.
Well, I thought it was weird that if it's a juvenile facility, why is just any adult that's not related to a kid allowed to come visit?
Yeah, that's weird.
It seems like pedophile shopping. Not saying that's what it was, but I'm not saying it wasn't. Now, later on, Ronnie would say that Jack and the men would perform sex acts on both he and Randy, but at the time, he thought that was normal and unaware that it was abuse, especially since Jack was so kind to them, and he just figured he was trying to help him out. Now, at school, Ronnie didn't do well because he had missed so much, so he just left school altogether. That's when he's 14. Now, Ronnie would meet Deborah Bischoff, and they would have a daughter together when he's just 16. This is 1979. Now, Ronnie is still bouncing back and forth between the state industrial school and living on the streets when he'll have, just the next year, his second child is born, a son. Now, that month his son is born, he's sent to prison when he's convicted of robbery. And at this point, Ronnie is just getting more and more hostile and can't stand being locked up, really only being a charmer when he wanted something. Now, you would think at this point, having 2 kids and not enjoying prison life, that you would stop breaking the law. But that wouldn't be the case for Ronnie.
Well, all right then. Some people got to learn the even harder ways.
So Ronnie and another prisoner would hatch a plan to break out and are successful on April 19th, 1981, when they bust out of a maximum security unit.
Was it the same one as my feller? Because I feel like they need to get their shit together.
While out, Ronnie would go after a man, John Mitchell, who he had believed raped his baby mama with the intention of killing him. He would stab John at his sister-in-law's home before getting shot in the neck while trying to kill him.
Oh, gosh.
He would skedaddle after being shot in the neck, so...
I would hope he skedaddled over to get some stitches.
He would be found and arrested fairly quickly. Not sure how far he thought he was going to get with being shot in the neck, but they did find him in a truck trying to hide. Now, mind you, he's 20 years old. They send his ass right back to jail. Now, 7 months later, he would run from the visiting room while the Board of Pardon, or where the Board of Pardons had just heard his plea for commutation. Now, he would take off running, scale one set of the razor-topped fences before an officer shoots him with a shotgun and drags him back into custody.
Sorry. Not funny, but...
I was like, how many times can this feller get shot? Now, even though Ronnie would talk to the guards and know them by name, in 1984, when they're moving him from his cell, he would attack an officer with a screwdriver. Now, that same year, he would lead a prison riot. There would be barricades to the cell blocks and fires would be set. Ronnie would even headbutt one officer. He'd go so crazy that they had to subdue him with a stun gun.
Wow. What year is this?
84.
Huh.
Now, same year, but in August, he would be rushed to the university hospital after faking an illness by vomiting. He would then assault the transportation officer with his own gun. As the officer was unlocking his shackles, Ronnie would lean down and tell him if he didn't hurry and the doctor came in, he'd have to kill them both, so you better get to it. Now, he had hit the officer so hard in the face with that gun that officer would need wires to reconstruct his face.
Oh, God.
So Ronnie would break out, get out of the hospital, get into the parking lot, point a gun at a medical student, Mike Lynch, and tell him he needed a ride out of here. Now, Mike has a motorcycle, so he'll be on the back with the gun poked into Mike's back while they ride out off the premises. He would then take Mike's clothes and skedaddle.
Poor Mike. He didn't take his motorcycle, though?
He'd have to know how to ride it.
I don't know. This guy doesn't seem too intelligent. I would think that he'd try it himself and reckon that'd be that.
Well, he didn't risk it, but he took his clothes. Now, 5 days of Ronnie being on the run, a letter carrier would find a gun and note in a mailbox. Ronnie had returned the officer's gun and wrote, "Here's the gun and wallet taken from the guard at the hospital. I don't want to hurt no one else. I just want to be free." As if that means they're going to stop looking for you.
So that doesn't make up for what you've done there, buddy.
And I was horrified that he just put that shit in somebody's mailbox. Can you imagine checking your mail?
No.
But he would be on the run for the next 3 months.
That's a long time.
Yeah.
Did he get in trouble?
I'm telling you the story.
No.
Then in October, Ronnie, high on cocaine, would march into a tavern where Melvin Otterstrom, who's 37, was working his second job. Now, Melvin was an avid mountain climber, a veteran of the 19th Special Forces Group of the Utah National Guard. Now, Ronnie would say that he went there to collect money that Melvin owed him, but the two would get into an argument. Now, after the taverns closed, the two fought physically. That's when Ronnie got the idea to just rob the place. And then there was a real struggle, and the gun that Ronnie had went off in Melvin's face, killing him. Now, Melvin would leave behind his 5-year-old son and his wife. So the medical examiner would state that there was no evidence of a struggle. It looked more like Melvin was lying on his back and the gun was pressed into his nose before the trigger was pulled.
Oh, gosh.
Ronnie would make off with less than $100.
Oh, my gosh.
Now, Ronnie would attend the funeral under the guise that he was an old childhood friend of Melvin's, so I feel like maybe there was a possibility that it was accidental, that he didn't go there with the intent to kill someone. He was high, and this is the only one that I would say that it wasn't intentional. But you go there with a gun and you put it in somebody's face.
Yeah.
You're still guilty of murder because then you shouldn't pull it out.
Yeah. You whip out the gun, or any weapon, you're ultimately responsible for what happens with that weapon.
Yeah. Now, he would be arrested in November for Melvin's murder after a tip was sent into the police that he was at the home of his cousin, and he was arrested and sent back to Utah State Prison to await trial on a $1.5 million bail.
Wait.
Now, I thought it was an eye roll that they send him back to the same place he escaped from.
Yeah, I was just like, all right. So, did he get also charges for escaping or just...
Well, hold up. So he's sent back to jail and awaiting trial kind of thing. So not being a fan of cell life, Ronnie began to hatch another escape plan.
Of course he did.
Now, April 2nd, 1985, Ronnie would be walking into the courthouse that morning when a woman gave Ronnie a gun. It's a bit murky as to how it all happened, but either she pressed the gun into his hand or she had it taped to the drinking fountain. It doesn't matter. At some point, he became armed. An officer yells, "Ronnie's got a gun!" One officer went running and another opened fire at Ronnie, who was unable to fire before being shot in the right shoulder by guard Luther Hensley. Now, that's Ronnie who was shot.
Okay.
He runs into the courtroom archives and points the gun at attorney Bob McRae, who was standing with his friend and coworker, Michael Burdell. Now, at first, Bob thought it was an April Fool's joke, but then realized quickly that it wasn't and ducked and ran out the door as Ronnie shot Michael, who yelled, "Oh my God," before being shot in the eye.
Oh, gosh.
Ronnie then makes his way to the basement and fires twice at the lawyer down there, but he doesn't hit him. At this point, that courthouse has got to be a madhouse. Ronnie running all over the place, people hearing firing. You've got to figure people are running everywhere. There's blood, there's a body. Bailiff Nick Kirk is on the hunt for him, running down 5 flights of stairs before running into Ronnie, who shoots him in the stomach. He left the bailiff on the floor and proceeded to the stairs that he had just come from. Now, he sees a man refilling the vending machine, aims the gun at him, telling him he needs a ride. Now, as the two men walk down the hallway towards the doors, the man jumps out the window, leaving Ronnie in the hallway without his hostage. And just one bullet left in his gun, so by the time he gets to the outside, it's surrounded by officers, and he complies when he's ordered to drop the gun and lie down.
I wish they open fired on him.
And me too! Now, Michael, and Bailiff Kirk were taken to the hospital. Michael would die 45 minutes into surgery. Bailiff Kirk would survive surgery and make a recovery. Now, Ronnie, although his injuries were serious, he too would recover.
That sucks.
Yeah. Now, during the investigation at the courthouse, a bag of men's clothes were found in the basement under a women's sink. Now, Ronnie's sister, Karma Jolie Hainsworth, would get sentenced to 8 years for help plan an escape plan and providing clothes.
She should have gotten longer than that. She should be getting the murder charge for providing him with a weapon and everything else. She's just as guilty as he was.
Yeah. Now, many, me included, wished the guard that had initially shot Ronnie had just kept shooting, but was unable to because Ronnie had used the other guard as a shield. Now, authorities also felt that the layout of the Hall of Justice was a security issue all on its own because the area that they bring prisoners through was an unrestricted area, which is why a gun was able to be
handed off
in that area. So,
yeah.
Now, in June of 85, Ronnie would plead guilty to the murder of Melvin and get a life sentence without the possibility of parole. Now, Ronnie would be upset because at his trial, he would be required to wear a leg brace that would lock if he decided to run.
How does that work?
I don't know. I was like, that's pretty cool.
That's some advanced technology for in the 80s.
I don't know how it worked, but I thought it was pretty cool. I don't even know if they just put a leg brace on him and told him that it was locked and it didn't actually lock.
That would be pretty funny.
But he was also upset because he didn't think he got a fair trial.
What?
Well, because the jury saw him shackled, that he couldn't be trusted. Well, you fucking can't.
Well, and I don't feel like that has anything to do with anything. He did exactly what he's being accused of.
Yeah. Considering he's escaped several times, he needed one of those, like, the collars for dogs. With the cone, so he can't squeeze through things.
Yeah.
I think he needed to have that thing permanently attached to him.
I agree.
Now, in October, he would have his trial for killing the attorney Michael Burdell. Now, the judge would tell the jury that if they felt that Ronnie was under mental or emotional duress, they could find him guilty of manslaughter, which would be a lesser charge. Now, it would be a 3-week-long trial. The jury would deliberate for less than 3 hours to find him guilty and 5.5 hours to decide that he should get the death penalty for the murder of Michael Burdell.
Good.
Then in October 1987, Ronnie would break the glass partition in the visitors area and have sex with the woman who came to visit him. The other inmates...
So, wait. Oh my gosh. Okay, first of all, how fast did he bust a nut that he was able to break the glass and blow a load before a guard could come and intervene?
He's been in prison for years, Andrea.
Good gosh.
Anyway, so he would proceed to have sex with the woman who was there to see him. The other inmates would cheer and barricade the doors.
Ah, that makes sense.
Now, it's because of Ronnie that Utah would pass a bill that proposed that law enforcement can shoot inmates attempting to escape whether they are armed or not. I feel like that was like a lethal one because I think up till this point it was non-lethal.
Does that mean he could have possibly been shot while doing it?
Well, he wasn't trying to escape. He was trying to free Willie.
They could have claimed he was trying to escape, though. Because I feel like that's I don't know.
Yeah.
The second he broke the glass, it left it questionable.
They should have been all over him. Yeah. He claims the glass was accidental.
Okay.
Now, with that death sentence hanging over his head and really nothing left to lose, this already violent asshole really doesn't have a chance to become a nice person. And in September 1994, Ronnie would get drunk off the alcohol that he had fermented in his prison cell.
Ew. They do that in the toilets.
Well, he did it in his prison sink. He would get into a fight with another inmate who he would stab, Richard Thomas, with a shiv that was made from a pair of sunglasses. Now, Richard would be stabbed 9 times with puncture wounds to his face, mouth, arms, and chest.
Ugh.
Now, none of the injuries were life-threatening, and he would survive, because mind you, it's a pair of sunglasses. But Ronnie would be charged with another capital crime reserved for first-degree felons during prison attacks. The charge would be thrown out because the victim didn't die, though.
That's stupid.
Right. So in 1991, Ronnie sought lethal injection, but because you get a choice.
All right.
But he would seek lethal injection, but would later change his mind in 1996 to being put to death by a firing squad because I like the firing squad. It's so much easier and there's no mistakes.
I'd have to agree.
I know. It's like, Now, in 1998, the old Hall of Justice would be replaced with a brand new courthouse to eliminate security issues. The old Hall of Justice would completely be demolished by 2001. It wouldn't be until 1999 when Ronnie would claim that he realized the damage he'd done. He would choke back emotion when explaining that he just didn't want to change and fought it for a long time. He takes ownership of the lives and families he's destroyed, saying he's embarrassed and ashamed of his past.
I'm sure his family is too.
Now, with his execution date rapidly approaching, Ronnie's lawyers would try to claim he had meningitis when he was 4 and that caused brain damage. And if that didn't do it, that he huffed gas and glue and even played with mercury that he stole from a gas meter. And if no one is buying the brain damage excuse now, they would argue that he was finally a changed man and had an interest in wanting to start an organic farm project for youngins. Ronnie apparently even sent a letter to Oprah asking for money for that project.
What?
And I'm going to say she didn't respond at all.
No, and is his organic project growing weed?
Probably so. And I'm just going to say it's too little too late. Fucker, he thinks starting a farm project for at-risk youths is going to fix things. And it's not like he wants somebody else to fund it, so I can have great ideas all day long. He can't be free to oversee it. It's not like he has a hope and hell to get parole to oversee any of the things. Like, he's a piece of shit, and he's getting us scared because his death day is approaching.
Not fast enough.
Yeah. And if all that wasn't good enough, Ronnie would say that it wasn't justifiable to execute him now. Too much time had passed since he committed the crime, and where I agree that up until this point, he has sat there for too long. I was like, what? He can't be punished because they waited too long to punish him.
That's not a thing, buddy.
Yeah. Nice try, though. And on June 15th, 2010, Ronnie would eat his last meal of steak, lobster, apple pie with ice cream, and 7-Up before beginning a 48-hour fast while watching the Lord of the Rings movies and reading Divine Justice. Now, the fast was for spiritual reasons, apparently.
Okay.
And on June 18th, after a refusal of Ronnie's stay of execution, Ronnie would sit restrained in a chair with a hood over his head, sandbags around him to absorb ricochets, a target pinned over his heart, and light shining on him. 5 marksmen, drawn from a pool of volunteer prison staffers, would take their places in the darkness roughly 20 to 25 feet from Ronnie with their .30 caliber rifles at the ready. Now, of the 5 rifles, 1 is loaded with a non-lethal wax cartridge, and the men were not told who has that one in it. Now, the idea behind this is if anyone feels bad later, they can always believe they had the wax bullet. Now, they would count down from 5 and fire in unison before hitting 2, and 2 minutes later, Ronnie would be pronounced dead by the medical examiner. Now, he would be cremated, and his ashes would be taken back by his daughter to Idaho where her family was. Now, death by firing squad was outlawed in Utah in 2004, but it didn't apply to any inmate that had been convicted prior. Now, Ronnie was given the option of his execution method, and he chose the firing squad. And Utah was the only state to have used the firing squad here recently. I was surprised in the 2000s.
Yeah.
Now, executions by firing squad are rare in the U.S. Only 2 had been killed this way since 1977. Now, in case you were curious, because I was, they do practice firing in unison prior to a firing squad execution so that it's only one bang rather than a volley of shots. And there's a standby executioner in case somebody can't proceed. Now, currently, the states that authorize firing squad include Mississippi, Utah, Oklahoma, and South Carolina. And that's as of 2023.
Well, they just added Idaho to that list.
Now, if your brain hole is wondering why there's an uptick in states preferring this one, it's because pharmaceutical companies are barring the use of their drugs because they manufacture them to save lives, not take them. So nobody wants their name on that label that's taking lives. So some states have found their normal go-to drugs like potassium chloride hard to get and have turned to phenobarbital or midazolam, but they cause excruciating pain, which has led other states to reconsider the gas chamber and the electric chair. Also, an argument for firing squad was that it hasn't been botched, unlike those that have been left writhing in agony after a lethal injection, and hangings or electrocutions where not a single firing squad has been botched. But the against side of that argument is that it's too far from painless and can take seconds of excruciating pain after the shot is fired.
But here's my thoughts, okay? And all the crybaby bitches out there can hate me for it, but you don't get sentenced to the death penalty because you are a nice person. So I feel like in the majority of almost all death penalty cases, the victims did not receive a painless death either. I'm not saying eye for an eye. I'm not going Old Testament on anybody here, but I am saying that with the firing squad, seconds is better than the writhing in pain or doing a hanging where it doesn't snap their neck and they're strangled for a little bit.
Or your feller last week that was a pincushion for an hour.
Right. So I don't know. I don't think a firing squad is in the gas chamber. Seriously? You want to what? I don't know how that would actually work, but I would assume you breathe.
They breathe in the gas.
Right. But what I'm saying is how the body reacts, asshole.
I would imagine it's not nice.
Right. I feel like that would be more painful than a bullet.
But I'm surprised nobody's mentioned the guillotine. It's reusable. To sharpen that edge. And you know how I love my statistics, so I'm going to throw some at you. So in the United States, from colonial days through 2002, over 15,000 people have been put to death for their crimes, which is wildly lower than I expected. 143 were by firing squad, 9,322 by hangings, and 4,426 by electrocutions.
That's interesting.
I know. I was surprised that that's not that many people.
And how many are still on death row?
Too many. That's why I said, like, you could double book a guillotine.
Yeah.
Knock some of these fellers out.
Well, my case from last week, they had to keep getting new medical supplies because after they poke you once with the needle, they got to get a fresh needle.
Yeah. It's not as sharp.
I realized, well, man, they were really digging then.
Yeah.
It's not supposed to reach your bone.
Somebody had shaky hands is what happened. I just thought it was interesting that they practiced. I mean, it would make sense, but also I didn't realize there was such a manual on the firing squad. Although I can't imagine having to clean that up. That was also a mark for against the firing squad, is that it's also a mess to clean up.
Put down a tarp. Go Dexter style on it.
Just put them in a tub. Actually, you know what? Put them in that container that they're going to cremate them in. That way you just contain.
Yeah, I was just about to say, dig that hole. But I guess if they're cremating them, then put them in the box.
I know I shouldn't reference movies, but all the movies I've seen where somebody's like death by firing squad and they're
tied
lit
to
up.
a pole.
Well, or they're lit up kind of thing, and it's not one shot. It's just like you're peppered with bullets. Where in reality, you're strapped to a chair, which makes sense so you don't get squirmy. A hood's over your head, and they put a target over your heart. Everybody aims and fires one shot all together. So that's 5, really 4 real shots straight into your heart. And they fire on 2. Some shit, but also I understand because if you try to squirm at one, although I don't know why you'd want to do that. Why would you want to be hit 5 times somewhere else? I'd be like, perfectly still, perfectly still, perfectly still. No!
What are the repercussions, I wonder, if the firing squad fire at a different part of the person's body?
You're probably charged.
Like, what if you go for the forehead?
Well, he's got a hood on his head, so you'd just be guessing. So my guess would be you could miss.
You'd still get him in the head.
And I feel like while they're counting down, they'd notice a barrel moving rather upward angle.
No, they're 25 feet away. I don't feel like it's that much of an...
It's not that far.
I don't feel like it's that much more of an upward angle.
Well, shall we reference your shooting history?
And that's all we've got. That's all we've got. Thanks for that. Bye.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode of Homicide Hobbies. If we made you laugh, if we made you cry, or if we mind-fucked you for the day, then we thank you for listening. Please write a review on whatever you're listening to us on. Tell your friends, tell your family, tell your coworkers. We're freaking awesome. And join us next week for another episode of Homicide Hobbies. I'm Andy.
And I'm Claire.
That's all we've got.